MademmyifyASMR. Welcome back to MademmyifyASMR. Tonight's video, because we are still very much, in my opinion, in spooky season until November the 5th, I am sharing some ghost stories with you. One of them was sent in by a subscriber to this channel known as a Warm Gun. You will often see him in the comment section of any of my true crime videos. Thank you so much for sharing your story with me. I will also be sharing one of my own ghost experiences and also one that I found on Reddit that I thought was quite interesting in the Ghost Stories subreddit. Before I get into the video, just a tiny little update for the next month. If you would like a personalised trigger video, I will be doing these, but I will be charging £10 for a 10-minute video, £5 for a 5-minute video. If you are interested in that, the email address is down below. Just drop me an email of what you would like, and I'll give you details on how to send the money, and I'll send you the video via WeTransfer or something similar. If you're not interested in that, just ignore this section of the intro. Anyway, I'm gonna get into these ghost stories. I'm hoping the iPad doesn't die because I forgot to charge it after my daughter was here at the weekend, and she loves to drain the battery watching Octonauts and such on it on a morning, but it gives me an extra hour in bed. Yeah, I know, terrible mother. The first story is the one that was submitted by a Warm Gun. There is a slight trigger warning on this one for casual drug use, because that's discussed quite a bit. He had a very misspent youth. I'm sorry, I hope you don't mind me saying that. 2001 or 2002, and I'm staying in a mansion in the countryside in the UK, doing coast steering and zip wiring, etc. I've searched for this mansion on Google for about 10 years and I can't find it anywhere. I can't remember where we were at all, to be honest, so I've searched England and Wales, as I know for a fact it wasn't Scotland, but to no avail. It seems unlikely that I'd just forget where a place was, but as a kid back then I was enjoying a misspent youth where we were sent on weekend day trips practically every week to keep us out of trouble. So we were pretty much doing something every weekend in one mansion, lodge or another. We arrived and the place is pretty big. Upstairs there were about 6 bedrooms, and downstairs was a big living room, a big dining room and a large kitchen. We jokingly asked the chef whether the place was haunted, and he said yes and proceeded to tell us about a woman that walked up invisible stairs and through a wall and noises in the night. He said that on many occasions when he was working late, he'd get so freaked out that he would go home and come back in the morning to finish cleaning up. To be fair, I suppose you could say that's just like the chef trying to wind you up because you're kids. And like nearly every old mansion that you go to, if you ask someone, oh, is this place haunted, they're gonna say yes. We thought nothing of it and all picked a bedroom. I would usually stay with my 2 friends, but on this occasion they had girlfriends also on the trip, so I didn't really want to be the 5th wheel, as it were, and I chose to stay in a bedroom with a guy I barely knew but got on okay with. Our bedroom was the furthest bedroom away except for one sat and smoked pot with my friends until about 11 p.m. when I decided to go back to my room and get some sleep. Just for context, we smoked weed pretty much every day, so it wasn't like I was especially high or anything. I get back to my bedroom and speak to my roommate, who is a sober guy, for about 20 minutes. We basically talked about this and that, nothing in particular, when all of a sudden we both hear the sound of what can only be described as someone dragging furniture in the empty room directly behind our heads. I immediately started to laugh, as I knew damn well this was my mates playing wind-ups and trying to freak us out. So I flew out of the room as quickly as I could, opened the bedroom door, and there was nothing there. I just assumed I hadn't been quick enough, so when I came back into the room, I told the guy it was definitely my mates. This was something that they would definitely do, even though it seemed a little strange as they were half asleep when I left. I got back into bed and we started talking for another 5 minutes when we both heard the exact same sound again. This time I jumped out of my bed quick as lightning, guaranteeing that I'd at least catch a glimpse of who was making the noise, except the corridor was empty. So I burst into the empty bedroom and there was no one there. There was about 6 beds and 2 wardrobes, so I quickly looked under each bed, then in each wardrobe, then behind the door, before storming down to my mate's room, opening the door, shouting, "What were you doing in that room?" only to startle all 4 of them awake. They seemed really confused, and one of my friends told me to get the fuck out, which was understandable, but only if they hadn't been making the sound. I knew these guys were definitely asleep when I came in, so I went back into my room completely confused and told the guy who I was staying with that I didn't think it was my mates. By this point I'm scratching my head. Then again, about 5 to 8 minutes of talking, we were just starting to nod off, when all of a sudden, louder than the other 2 times, we heard furniture being dragged across the floor again. This time we both got out of bed and ran out the door and burst into the room. Nothing. We rechecked the bedrooms, under the beds, in the wardrobes and behind the door, and made sure all of the windows were locked, which was a pretty pointless thing to do as we were on the first floor and it was pretty high up. We went down into the kitchen and started to look around to see if there was anything that could have made the sound, but the whole place was empty and all the lights were off. We checked the whole kitchen and we'd actually watched the chef go home at about 8 p.m. We were still pretty sure / hoping that someone was fucking with us, so we double checked every single room that had got someone in it and made sure none of them knew what was going on. Most of the people were asleep and the only people who were still awake and were in bed reading. They were further away than my friends. They also had no idea what we were talking about and said it was probably my mates messing about. It would have been impossible for the guys awake to have made the noise and then get back down the corridor into the room without at least being seen. You'd have to be the Flash. It freaked us out, but we decided that we probably wouldn't get to the bottom of it, so we went back to bed. We literally just put our heads on our pillows when the sound of furniture being dragged across the floor started up again louder than ever and made us jump out of our skin. Although this is a part of the story I usually leave out when telling it at parties. We usually complain about insensitive people moving furniture in the middle of the night, but yeah, that was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. And he added a recent update. Although this wasn't in my original post, another thing that happened on the trip was truly bizarre, but more of a what are the odds kind of thing. I was sat with my feet out of the window, and this was at night, getting high laughing with the people in the room, when all of a sudden I'm sliding off the roof. If you've ever fell from something, you know the feeling I'm talking about. I joked at the time that I lost my footing, but I honestly didn't. 1 minute I was sat there, firmly on the ledge, next thing I'm shooting fast down the tiled roof, then weightlessness, as I'm clearly falling, then I land on grass. I stood up, look up at the open window and start laughing as my mate pops his head through the window, and as he didn't see me fall, he thinks I did it on purpose. I come round the front of the mansion and tell other people in the group what happened. They just laughed. The next morning I show my 2 friends where I landed the night before, and I shit you not, I'd landed on the smallest patch of grass imaginable. On the left and right of this sole patch was upturned rusty tables and chairs and bits of wood with nails in. I was inches away from being impaled on anywhere between 20 to 30 different spikes. Nobody believes that I didn't lose my balance, and I don't blame them. But I was smoking weed every day back then, and I wasn't in the habit of falling out of windows. I definitely wasn't pushed, but I definitely didn't slip or lose my balance. Very weird. And he added at the bottom, love the channel, it's one of my favourites, keep up the good work. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed that story. I'm sure if there's any parts of it that I've not quite got right, or if anyone has any questions about certain parts or has any theories, I'm sure that a warm gun will definitely be in the comments of this video. I'm gonna do the one from Reddit, and then I'll do my own story just to add actually to the story before, like the noise of furniture being dragged across the room. This is something I do have a little bit of experience. Like, I only ever experienced it once. When I was about 13, we'd gone on holiday to Spain, and we were staying in this villa that belonged to a woman who, my mum's partner, he did a lot of cleaning jobs for her, and she was like really fond of him because when you looked at pictures of her late husband, he was like the spitting image of my mum's partner. So she'd let us stay at her villa essentially for free. And I was a moody teenager, and my parents had gone out drinking, and I was just like, I'm just going to stay in the villa, do some writing, because I was like really into writing back then, and watch some TV. The only TV channels were in German. I don't know why, some weird dodgy satellite, though I did discover Hellsing, which is now one of my favourite animes. I have 2 tattoos from the anime Hellsing on my arm. And so yeah, I was sat at home, not home, in the villa, writing while my parents were out getting drunk in a bar. And this was like a villa where the power went out all of the time. Like you had to press a button and flick a circuit breaker at least once a day, and that's kind of what taught me how to like do circuit breakers, which was useful for later in life. Anyway, I was sat there writing on the bed in my room, and I hear a noise of like a chair being dragged across the floor downstairs. Like, these are marble floors, and the chairs in the kitchen are solid oak chairs. I assumed that maybe my parents had got back early and had somehow got in without me hearing, so I kind is in r/ghost stories, and it's called Uninvited Roommate. In 2014, the family tagged along during a week-long conference in another state. The drive would normally have taken 5 to 6 hours because of earlier storm damaging roads that year. The actual time was an additional 2 hours, felt like longer on the return. So after the long drive, we finally pull up to the hotel that night. We parked in the rear lot and had to take the back way to the lobby to check in. The hotel is on the National Registry of Historic Places, so of course old lights make a very dark interior at night. One antique elevator, the pool at the time was filled with concrete, floors dipped and were warped, that kind of money grab place. Finally, we got to the room, unpacked and went to sleep. The next day was the beginning of the conference, exploring the hotel and visiting the local national park. That night I woke up because I felt tingling through my entire body. Not the normal tingle when you can move your limbs around and regain feeling, but the kind of sensation that basically is simultaneously numbing and burning. I tried to open my eyes, but my lids felt glued shut. The tingling sensation became more intense, and I could feel it in my skull. My heart was beating out of control. I swear I could hear the erratic pumping in my ears. The burning was even worse. The burning was even worse at this point. My arms were still unmoving, stuck to my sides, legs and feet completely useless. I kept mentally telling myself to wake up. I've had limbs fall asleep before to the point I can't walk for a bit. I get sleep paralysis. I often have that dream where I'm falling off a cliff, but this was nothing like that whatsoever. Wake up, I kept repeating in my head. Now I was absolutely convinced that there was something trying to take over. Get out, I silently yelled behind my tingling, burning, closed eyes. Leave us alone, and still everything just intensified. I ordered myself to try and move, still laying under the covers. I kept mentally screaming and ordering whatever it was to move on, and then everything in my head crescendoed. Blissfully silent, my eyelids fluttered, I could wiggle my fingers and toes. I slowly moved my hands and felt my heartbeat still pumping like crazy, but at least I could finally move. Sweat covered my forehead and there were tears running down my face. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, but there was no other visits. Thankfully, no one else in the room felt the disturbance, but weird stuff happened, like a high dollar tip that was mistakenly left at dinner. You're welcome, and my wedding ring at the time fell into the clean toilet in the room. Yes, this story was true. Yes, this hotel is real. It's infamous and a pilgrimage for horror buffs. Later in the week, there was a group that was playing ghosts with sheets in the hallways. Please don't be a jerk and do this unless you book the entire floor. It's rude, and you aren't Adam and Barbara Maitland. And no, this did not happen in room 217. I do wonder what hotel that is, because they didn't say, and I don't know American haunted hotels that well. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed that story from Reddit. The next one is a personal one for me. Like, I've got a few, and a few that are my dad's that he's told me. And also because I used to do a lot of ghost hunting a few years ago. It's a while since I've been. But this one is a story from when I was young. This not so much something that happened to me, but something that happened whilst I was there. separated, I always refer to my mum and my mum's partner as my parents, by the way. Although in this scenario I mean my mum and dad. So when my mum and dad are separated and my mum and her partner moved to York, my dad stayed in Wakefield, where he still lives now, although he alternates between there and where his fiance lives. Anyway, in the school holidays I used to go back to Wakefield and I would stay with my dad, obviously. My childhood best friend was a girl named Tara, and she lived in Wakefield, a few streets away from my dad. And I loved camping as a kid, and I would often go camping with my dad, where he lived in Wakefield, or where he lives in Wakefield, is quite near like an open expanse of wetland, so you can walk for about 30 minutes and be just like in a perfect camping ground. Anyway, this particular story happened whilst we were out camping. The camping trip was me, my dad and my friend Tara, and one of my dad's friends called Tony, and two of his sons. I can't remember his son's name. I think one was Nathan or Nathaniel, and one was Louis. Anyway, we'd set up camp in this kind of clearing. There were bushes and there were trees, and there was a rock face that kind of sheltered us from the wind and from any rain. My dad had built a campfire, we'd set up the tents, and my dad had cooked some chicken or some pigeon or something on the fire, and we'd had that. Like, I think he'd pre-cooked it and then he'd just heated it up, because I don't think he'd have taken the risk of giving us all food poisoning. Anyway, this rock face, you could go round out of the camp and you could go round the back of it, and there was kind of like a tree that was growing out of it, and you could like sit on the tree and look down into where we were camping. Anyway, me and my dad and Tara were sat around the fire with Tony and his sons, and one of his sons says something, "Oh Dad, I need to go to the toilet." Like, he must have been about 5 or 6, like young enough that he might still need help going to the bathroom. Anyway, Tony was like, "Yeah, no problem." Went off with him like a few times before the sun had gone down, like it was dark at this point. Tony and this youngest son had gone up and were like, they'd been like sat on the tree, and just yelled down to us, so we'd all look up. Anyway, after they'd gone off, they must have been gone for a couple minutes. Tara goes, "Ow, someone threw a rock at me." And she was sat with like her back to the cliff, and so my dad had like assumed, it was like, "Oh, it must be Tony and his son," and he'd like yelled up and been like, "Oi, don't throw rocks, you've hit someone down here," and was ready to kind of like have a word with Tony when he came back. And we had like, just before Tara had said that she'd been hit, we'd like heard some rocks fall or something, so we were like, it must be them. Anyway, Tony comes back with his son, and my dad's like, "Oh, you should have stopped, like, why did you throw the rock? That hit Tara, it could have hurt her." And he was like, we didn't throw any rock. Who were the people who were here in the camp? And my dad was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "Oh, I thought that maybe," I think it was, he'd mentioned one of my dad's other friends, Nigel, who'd said that location where we would be. Sorry, loud motorbike. He was like, oh, did Nigel come through? And my dad was like, no, we were alone. And he was like, well, we were up the top of the rock, but we didn't throw anything. And when we looked down, we saw 3 or 4 people stood around the fire with you. Now, none of us had felt any presence. The only thing had been the rock that was thrown at Tara, and I suppose realistically that could have been if there was a rock that was loose and they were looking over and they'd loosened it with their foot. But they were adamant they hadn't thrown any rock, and they were adamant that there were people stood around the fire with us. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that story. It was slightly rambly as I tried to remember different bits. I have some others from when I've been ghost hunting, so if you would like to hear them in a future video, please let me know. Or alternatively, if you have your own ghost experience and you would like to send it through to me, my email address, it'll be the same one as for if you would like to request a personalised video, which is MademmyifyASMR@gmail.com. Either way, it will be in the description